Commander stared at the sensor readings for the third time, his secondary eyes blinking in disbelief. The numbers made no sense. His ship, the Eternal Watch, had been surveying the void reaches for 2 standard months now, and every day brought new impossibilities. "Commander, the energy signature is getting stronger," his sensor officer reported, her voice tight with worry. "It's not natural. Something is out there." Nodded slowly. The void reaches were aptly named. This region of space stretched for hundreds of light years in every direction, with not a single star to light the darkness. No planets, no asteroids, no gas clouds. Just empty space so complete that even the background radiation seemed to fade away. No species in the Galactic Council had ever found a reason to come here. There was nothing to find. Until now. "Move us closer," ordered, "but keep the shields at maximum. I don't like this." The ship glided forward through the black. People had been exploring space for 10,000 years. They knew what belonged out here and what didn't. Energy signatures like the one they were following meant civilization, meant technology, meant life. But life needed something to anchor to. A planet, a moon, even a large asteroid. Life couldn't exist in pure void. The sensor officer gasped. "Commander, visual contact, you need to see this." The main screen flickered to life and felt his blood run cold. Floating in the absolute darkness ahead was a structure. Not a ship, not a station. A structure that every principle of orbital mechanics he had ever learned. It was massive, easily 20 kilometers across, shaped like a vast sphere of interconnected rings and platforms. Lights glowed along its surface, warm and inviting. Gardens were visible through transparent sections, green with plant life. And it had no engines, no propulsion, no gravitational anchor. It simply existed in the void, hanging in space as if suspended by invisible threads. "Scan for a nearby star," demanded. "There must be something holding it in place." "No stars within 30 light years, Commander. No planets. No gravitational sources at all. The structure is in true interstellar space." "That's impossible." "Yes, Commander, but it's there." Approached the communications console himself. "Open a channel, all frequencies. Let them know we come in peace." The channel opened with a burst of static, then cleared. A voice came through, speaking in perfect galactic standard. "Vessel Eternal Watch, this is Habitat 17. We've been tracking your approach for 3 days. State your purpose." Felt his throat tighten. They spoke standard. They knew his ship's name, though it was nowhere on the hull. "This is Commander of the Empire, representing the Galactic Council. We detected unusual readings and came to investigate. May I ask who you are?" A pause, then. "We're human. I suppose you wouldn't know about us. We don't usually advertise our presence." Human searched his memory. Humans were a species that had been on the Council's watch list for about 2 centuries. They came from a death world in the outer spiral arm, had achieved faster-than-light travel remarkably fast, and had a disturbing tendency to colonize places no sane species would consider. But they were supposed to be in their own sector, thousands of light years away. "Human, what are you doing all the way out here?" "We live here, Commander, have for about 150 years now. This habitat has a population of just over 8,000. Would you like to dock? It's not often we get visitors." Looked at his crew. They all wore expressions of shock and confusion. "You live here, in the void. How is that possible?" "It's easier than you'd think. Send over a shuttle. We'll talk face to face if you're comfortable with that." Against his better judgment, agreed. An hour later, he found himself in a small shuttle with 2 security officers, approaching the impossible structure. Up close, it was even more impressive. The surfaces gleamed with what looked like organic material, as if the entire habitat had been grown rather than built. Docking ports extended to meet them, and the shuttle settled into a bay that could have held a dozen more vessels. The airlock cycled and stepped through, expecting to see a standard docking area. Instead, he found himself in what looked like a park. Real grass grew beneath his feet. Trees stretched overhead, their leaves rustling in an artificial breeze. A fountain burbled nearby, water flowing in the gentle gravity. The ceiling was transparent, showing the stars beyond. It was beautiful and deeply unsettling. "Welcome to Habitat 17. Turned. A human woman stood there, smiling. She was young, perhaps 30 in their years, with dark skin and eyes that seemed to reflect the starlight. She wore simple clothes and no environmental suit, even though sensors said the atmospheric mix should have been toxic to Earth-standard humans. She said, extending a hand. "I'm the coordinator for this habitat. You look confused, Commander." "I am," admitted, carefully shaking her hand. "Forgive me, but nothing about this makes sense. How are you here? How are you alive? What's powering all this?" Smile widened. "Would you like the short version or the technical one?" "Start with short. I'll tell you when I need more details." "All right. About 200 years ago, some human scientists had an idea. They were tired of fighting over planets. Planets are nice, but they're limited. There are only so many, and they're all claimed or fought over. So they asked a simple question: why do we need planets at all?" Blinked. "Because that's where life exists. That's where resources are. That's where you can survive." "Exactly. That's what everyone thinks. But humans started looking at the numbers. Do you know how much empty space there is between stars?" "Of course, it's void, emptiness." "Exactly. And there's so much more of it than there is of planets. The galaxy is 99.9% empty space. Everyone ignores it because you can't live there. But we thought, what if you could? What if you could live anywhere, not just on the tiny specks of rock near fusion fires?" Gestured around them. So they started experimenting. Bioengineering, genetic modification, cybernetic enhancement. They built the first habitats and moved volunteers out here. People who wanted to be pioneers. People who wanted to be free of planetary politics. And something amazing happened. She walked toward the fountain and followed. "We adapted, faster than anyone expected. Human genetics are remarkably flexible, Commander. When you put us in harsh environments, we change. Usually slowly over thousands of years. But with a little help from technology, we can change much faster. The first generation struggled. The second generation did better. By the third generation, children were being born who could survive exposure to hard vacuum for short periods. By the fifth, we didn't need as much oxygen. By the 10th, reached the fountain and, to his horror, plunged her hand into the water and pulled out something small and wriggling. She held it up, and he saw it was some kind of aquatic creature. Then she opened her mouth and bit into it, raw and living. By the 10th generation, we'd become something new. Felt sick. You can't just change your biology like that. Evolution doesn't work that fast. It does for us, especially when we guide it. Finished her snack and wiped her mouth. "Come on, let me show you something that will really surprise you." She led him through the habitat, pointing out features as they went. The gardens weren't just decorative. They were food production, oxygen generation, and waste recycling all in one. The habitat's power came from collecting cosmic radiation and converting it directly into usable energy. The structure itself was made from a hybrid of organic and synthetic materials that could repair itself and grow new sections as needed. "We have 143 habitats like this scattered through the void," explained. "Each one houses between 5 and 15,000 people. We're connected by a transit network that uses a form of FTL you won't find in council space. We trade, we visit each other, we have families and lives and dreams. We're a civilization, Commander. We're just not one that anyone knew existed." They reached a large observation deck and stopped. "But I think you need to see this to really understand." She walked to a control panel and pressed something. A section of the deck floor retracted, revealing an airlock beneath. Before could ask what she was doing, stepped into the airlock. "Wait," he shouted, "you need a suit." Laughed, and the sound was warm and very human. "No, Commander, I really don't." The airlock cycled. watched in horror as the atmosphere vented, as the temperature dropped to near absolute zero, as the pressure fell to nothing. Stood in hard vacuum, exposed to cosmic radiation and the killing void of space. She should have been dead in seconds. Instead, her skin began to glow. Soft bioluminescence rippled across her body in waves of blue and green. Her eyes reflected the distant starlight. She spread her arms wide and tilted her head back, as if basking in sunlight that didn't exist. Through the habitat's communication system, her voice came clear and strong. "This is what we are now, Commander. This is what humans become when we're free to evolve without limits. We don't just survive the void, we thrive in it." She stayed out there for 5 full minutes while watched, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Finally, she stepped back into the airlock and it cycled closed. When the pressure equalized and the door opened, she walked out as if nothing had happened. Her skin had stopped glowing but could still see subtle differences. Her eyes were slightly larger. Her skin had a faint shimmer to it. "We're adapted to this, Commander. Not all of us can do what I just did. The older generation still needs suits for extended exposure, but the children born in the void, they're something entirely new. We call them void-born, and they're more comfortable in space than in atmosphere." Found his voice, though it shook. Do you understand what this means, what you're telling me?" "I do. It means humanity has colonized an environment that no other species can survive in. It means we're expanding into territories no one else wants. It means we've found an infinite frontier. It means," said slowly, "that the Galactic Council is going to be very, very frightened of you." His expression turned sad. "I know, that's why we've stayed hidden. That's why we don't advertise our presence. We knew that eventually someone would find us. We hoped it would be someone reasonable." She looked at him directly. "Are you reasonable, Commander?" Thought about the implications. Humans living in the void, spreading through the empty spaces between stars. Growing, adapting, becoming something that didn't need planets or traditional resources. A species that could live anywhere and everywhere, filling the galaxy's vast emptiness with their presence. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'm going to have to report this. You understand that?" "Yes, we expected it. When you do, tell them we mean no harm. We're not taking anyone's worlds. We're not competing for resources. We're living in space that no one else will ever use. All we want is to be left alone to grow and explore and live our lives." "I'll tell them," promised. But even as he said it, he knew it wouldn't matter. The Council wouldn't see pioneers seeking a new frontier. They would see a threat, a species that had broken the fundamental rules of biology and survival. They would see humanity doing what they did best, taking the impossible and making it ordinary. As returned to his ship, he looked back at Habitat 17, glowing softly in the absolute darkness of the void. It looked peaceful. It looked like a home. But he knew that when the Council learned what humanity had become, peace would be the last thing anyone felt. Fear would spread through the galaxy like fire, and knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his core, that this was only the beginning. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 weeks after its report reached the central government. Representatives from 47 species crowded into the Grand Chamber on the neutral station Concordia. The mood was tense. Word had already spread through unofficial channels. Rumors spoke of ghost cities in the void, of humans who could walk in vacuum, of an invisible empire growing in the darkness between stars. Ambassador In of the Collective called the session to order. Her voice boomed through the translation matrices. "We are here to discuss the report filed by Commander of the Empire. Commander, please present your findings." Stood, his formal robes feeling too tight. He had spent the journey back preparing this presentation, but he still wasn't sure how to make the Council understand. "Honored representatives, I discovered a human habitat in the void reaches, grid section 947. The habitat houses approximately 8,000 humans and has been operational for over a century." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Representative of the spoke up, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into standard. A habitat? You mean a research station? No, representative. A permanent settlement, a city, and it's not alone. The humans claim to have 143 such habitats scattered through deep void space. The murmurs became shouts, and had to activate the sound dampeners to restore order. That's over 1 million humans living in interstellar space. How is this possible? What anchors these habitats? Nothing, Ambassador. They float freely in true void. They use some form of power generation based on cosmic radiation collection. They're entirely self-sufficient. A defense minister stood, his scales flushed with agitation. This is clearly a violation of the Deep Space Treaty. No species is permitted to establish permanent installations outside of claimed stellar territories without council approval. The treaty was written on the assumption that permanent installations require nearby resources, countered. These habitats don't. They exist in space that no one claims because no one can use it. Until now, someone muttered, and raised a hand for silence. Commander, you mentioned in your report that the humans have significant biological modification. Explain. Activated the holographic display. The footage of stepping into vacuum played before the assembled council. The gasps and exclamations told him that they understood exactly what they were seeing. A being that should have died in seconds, standing in hard vacuum as if it were air. Her skin glowing with captured radiation. Her body processing energies that would kill any other known species. They've adapted, said quietly. The humans who live in the void are no longer quite the same as their planetary cousins. They can survive limited exposure to vacuum. They process radiation for energy. They require less oxygen, less food, less of everything we consider necessary for life. And they claim the younger generations are even more adapted, children born in the void who are more comfortable in space than in atmosphere. The chamber fell silent. It was Doctor, the council's chief, who spoke first. This is evolutionary impossible. Adaptation takes millions of years, not a few generations. Unless, said, you guide it. The humans use advanced genetic engineering, cybernetic enhancement, and selective breeding. They've accelerated their own evolution. That's illegal under council bioethics laws, In pointed out. For council species, yes, but humans aren't full council members. They're on the watch list, but they haven't applied for membership. They're not bound by our laws. The representative clicked urgently. This is a threat, can't you see? They're creating a subspecies designed to colonize environments we cannot access. If they succeed, they'll control all the empty space in the galaxy. They'll surround us. They could cut off routes between our worlds. The human I spoke with claimed they have no hostile intent, said, though his voice lacked conviction. They say they're only using space that no one else wants. That no one else can use, the defense minister corrected. There's a difference. Just because we can't live in the void doesn't mean we're comfortable with someone else doing it. What happens in 100 years when there are millions of these void-adapted humans? What happens in 1,000 years? Doctor spoke again, her voice troubled. I've been analyzing the data from Commander's report. The implications are worse than you think. Human genetic flexibility is already remarkable. They evolved on a high-gravity world with extreme environmental variations. Their DNA is unusually adaptable. If they've truly managed to accelerate their adaptation to void conditions, they could apply the same techniques to any environment. Meaning, in asked, though from her expression suspected she already knew. Meaning they could adapt to anything. High radiation zones, gas giants, the surfaces of stars, the event horizons of black holes. Anywhere with energy and space, humans could potentially evolve to survive there. They wouldn't need planets anymore. They wouldn't need anything we consider habitable. The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted over each other. Some called for immediate military action. Others demanded diplomatic contact. A few suggested ignoring the problem and hoping it went away. Through it all, stood silent, remembering sad smile when she said she knew the council would be frightened. It took in 10 minutes to restore order. When she finally did, her voice was grim. We need more information before we make any decisions. Commander, you will lead a larger expedition back to this Habitat 17. Take scientists, diplomats, and a military escort. We need to know the full extent of human settlement in the void. We need to understand their technology, their capabilities, and their intentions. And if they refuse to cooperate, asked, then we'll know they're hostile. In's eyes were cold. This council has maintained peace in the galaxy for 50,000 years. We've done it by ensuring that no single species becomes too powerful, too advanced, or too different from the norm. Humanity is pushing boundaries that have kept us all safe. Wanted to argue, but he knew it was pointless. The council was afraid, and fear made people dangerous. I'll prepare the expedition immediately. One more thing, the defense minister added. The military escort will carry full armaments. If these void humans are a threat, we need to be prepared to neutralize them. His blood ran cold. You're talking about attacking civilian habitats. I'm talking about protecting council species from a potential existential threat. The minister's scales flushed darker. Those habitats are filled with beings that have deliberately modified themselves into something post-biological. They're not protected by standard warfare ethics. They're still people. Are they? The minister leaned forward. Or are they weapons? Humans with the ability to survive anywhere, to spread everywhere, to adapt to anything. If we let them continue unchecked, in 1,000 years, there might not be any planets left for the rest of us. They'll have filled every corner of the galaxy with their habitats and their void-born children, and will be living in the spaces they allow us. In raised her hand again. Enough. Commander has his orders. We reconvene when he returns with more data. Until then, this information is classified. We don't need a panic spreading through council space. But as left the chamber, he knew it was already too late. The representatives would talk to their governments. The governments would talk to their militaries and intelligence services. The intelligence services would start monitoring human space and searching for void habitats. The fear was already spreading, and fear had a way of making terrible decisions seem reasonable. 2 months later, his expedition departed for the void reaches. 12 ships accompanied him this time. 4 were science vessels, 3 were diplomatic cruisers, and 5 were military destroyers armed with enough firepower to reduce a planet to rubble. The message was clear. The council wanted answers, and they wanted humanity to know there would be consequences for making the galaxy's dominant species feel threatened. The journey took 4 weeks. Spent most of it reviewing reports from Council intelligence. They'd found 37 more human habitats in deep void, all hidden by stealth technology that made them nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. Populations ranged from 3,000 to 20,000 each. The habitats were connected by a transit network that operated on principles Council scientists didn't understand. And every habitat they'd observed showed signs of the same biological adaptations had demonstrated. When they arrived at Habitat 17, wasn't surprised to find waiting for them. Her message came through before they'd even finished their approach. Welcome back, Commander. I see you brought friends. A lot of friends with very big guns. The Council wants to talk, replied. Properly this time. They want to understand what you're doing out here. They want to know if we're a threat. His voice held no judgment, just statement of fact. It's all right, we expected this. Send your diplomats, send your scientists, we'll show you whatever you want to see, we have nothing to hide. Just like that, you're not worried about what we might do with that information. A pause. Commander, if you wanted to destroy us, you'd have done it already. Those destroyers have enough firepower to vaporize this habitat. You haven't fired. That tells me you're here to learn, not to kill. So yes, just like that, come aboard, bring whoever you want. We'll answer your questions. The diplomatic delegation consisted of 50 people: scientists, cultural experts, military observers, and politicians. Led them through the habitat's docking bay, remembering his first visit. Everything looked the same: the park-like interior, the transparent ceiling showing the stars, the impossible mix of nature and technology that shouldn't exist in the void. Met them with a dozen other humans, all void-born by the look of them, with that faint shimmer to their skin and the slightly too large eyes. "Welcome to our home," she said. "I'm sure you have a lot of questions. Where would you like to start?" Doctor stepped forward. "I'd like to see your medical facilities. I want to understand how your adaptations work at the cellular level." "Of course, we have full gene mapping labs. You can have access to our entire biological database." A military observer spoke up. "We need to see your defensive capabilities, your weapons systems." His expression didn't change. "We don't have weapons systems. We're not a military installation." "You must have some form of defense." "We have emergency seals, radiation shielding, and collision avoidance." "That's it. We're not fighters, Commander. We're farmers and engineers and artists who happen to live in space." "You're also," Ambassador In said coldly, "a species that has violated every principle of controlled evolution and biological ethics that the Council has established over. We're a species that has evolved to survive in an environment you abandoned as useless," replied, her voice still calm. "We haven't attacked anyone. We haven't taken anyone's resources. We haven't violated anyone's territory. We've simply learned to live in a place where no one else can." "That's the problem." In stepped closer. "You've made yourselves into something different, something that doesn't play by the same rules as the rest of us. How long before you decide you don't need to follow any of our rules?" Met her gaze steadily. "We left the normal rules behind when we moved to the void, but that doesn't make us enemies. It makes us different. I thought the Council celebrated diversity." "Diversity within acceptable parameters. You've gone beyond those parameters." "Then maybe," said softly, "your parameters are too narrow." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut, stepped between them. "Let's focus on gathering information first. Accusations can come later. Doctor, start your biological analysis. Military observers, inspect their systems. Diplomats, begin formal negotiations on the status of void habitats under Council law. We have work to do." Over the next 3 weeks, the expedition studied Habitat 17 and visited 6 other void settlements. What they found confirmed worst fears. The humans had built an entire civilization in the darkness between stars. They had technology the Council couldn't match, biology that broke every rule, and a population growing faster than anyone had expected. The young void-born humans were the most striking. Children who had never known planetary gravity, who could survive in hard vacuum for hours, whose bodies processed radiation as efficiently as plants process sunlight. They played in the habitat's parks, attended schools, learned trades. They were normal children in every way that mattered, except they were adapted to an environment that would kill any other child in the galaxy within seconds. Doctor's report was damning. The human genetic modifications were stable, heritable, and improving with each generation. Within another century, she predicted void-born humans would be able to survive indefinitely in hard vacuum. Within 2 centuries, they might not need atmosphere at all. They were becoming true space-dwelling organisms, as comfortable in the void as fish in water. The military observers reported that while the habitats had no traditional weapons, they didn't need them. Their stealth technology made them nearly impossible to detect. Their life support could shut down sections instantly, venting them to space. And their transit network could evacuate entire populations in minutes if threatened. Attacking them would be like trying to fight ghosts. On the final day of the expedition, met with one last time. They stood in the observation deck where she had first shown him what she could do. Beyond the transparent hull, the void stretched infinite and black. "Your council is going to try to stop us," said quietly. "Aren't they?" "I don't know, maybe. They're frightened of people living in empty space. That's what frightens them." "Of what it means," replied. "Every species in the galaxy is limited by the same things. We need planets or large stations to live on. We need resources from asteroids and moons. We need to stay near stars for energy. These limitations keep us all roughly equal. If one species gets too powerful, the others can band together to contain them because we're all playing by the same rules." He gestured to the habitat around them. "You're not playing by those rules anymore. You've found a way to live anywhere. If your population grows unchecked in a few thousand years, there could be billions of void-born humans scattered through the galaxy. You'd outnumber all the planetary species combined. You'd control the space between our worlds. You'd be everywhere and nowhere, impossible to fight, impossible to contain. So they'll try to destroy us now, while we're still small. I don't know what they'll do, but I know they're afraid, and fear makes people dangerous." Was quiet for a long moment. "We didn't choose to be frightening, we just chose to be free. Is that so wrong?" "No," admitted, "but it might get you killed anyway." He left the habitat an hour later, his heart heavy with the knowledge of what was coming. As the expedition's ships gathered to depart, looked back at the glowing structure floating in the absolute darkness. Inside were 8,000 people living their lives, raising families, pursuing dreams. People who had committed no crime except daring to live differently. The council would see them as a threat. The military would see them as targets. The politicians would see them as a problem to be solved, and knew, with terrible certainty, that this first contact between void humans and the Galactic Council would not end peacefully. Fear had spread too far. The question now was whether anyone would survive what came next. The Council's decision came down 2 months after the expedition returned. It arrived not as a formal declaration, but as a classified military order distributed to the fleets of the 5 major powers. Only learned about it because a sympathetic colleague leaked him a copy. Operation Void Clearance. The language was bureaucratic and sterile, but the intent was clear. The human void habitats were declared a Category 1 existential threat to galactic stability. All settlements were to be identified, isolated, and if they refused to abandon their habitats and return to planetary space, neutralized with extreme prejudice. Stood in his quarters, holding the data pad with shaking hands. They were going to do it. The Council was going to attempt genocide against people whose only crime was living in the wrong place. He tried to warn them. He sent 3 encrypted messages to Habitat 17, each one more urgent than the last. He didn't know if they got through. The military had started jamming communications to the void regions, but he had to try. The first strike force launched a week later. 12 heavy cruisers, supported by 30 destroyers and a fleet carrier loaded with attack fighters. Their target was a habitat in Grid Section 419, home to approximately 12,000 void-born humans. The military designated it Target Alpha. Wasn't part of the strike force, but he monitored the communications channels. He heard the fleet admiral's announcement demanding the habitat's surrender. He heard the human response, calm, confused, asking what crime they had committed. He heard the admiral's ultimatum, evacuate within 6 hours or be destroyed. Then silence. 6 hours and 12 minutes after the ultimatum, the strike force opened fire. Mass drivers, plasma cannons, and fusion missiles turned Target Alpha into an expanding cloud of debris and vapor. 12,000 people died in 14 minutes. The Admiral's report called it a clean operation with no enemy casualties inflicted on Council forces. Vomited in his quarters, bile burning his throat. Enemy casualties. As if void-born children were enemy soldiers. The second strike went at Target Beta, a smaller habitat with only 5,000 residents. This time, the humans tried to evacuate. Their transit network activated, and ships began fleeing the habitat. The Council forces pursued. 23 evacuation ships were destroyed before they could complete their FTL jumps. The habitat itself lasted 18 minutes under bombardment. By the end of the first week, the Council had attacked 16 habitats. Estimated casualties exceeded 140,000. The military declared Operation Void Clearance a success, claiming they were protecting galactic stability. Then the humans struck back. It started with a military supply station in the outer territories. The station was a fortress, armed and shielded, designed to support the fleets hunting void habitats. It disappeared overnight. No distress call, no debris, no survivors. One moment it was there, the next it was simply gone. 3 days later, a Council patrol fleet of 6 destroyers vanished while hunting for habitats in Grid Section 783. Again, no distress calls, no debris, nothing. Just 6 ships erased from existence. The Council Military Command tried to keep it quiet, but word leaked out. Rumors spread through the fleets. Stories of ghost ships appearing from nowhere, of weapons that didn't register on sensors, of entire crews found dead with no marks on their bodies. The void humans were fighting back, and they were fighting in ways the Council had never seen. Requested an audience with the Council leadership. It took 3 weeks to get approval, and when he finally stood before them, he could see they were shaken. The confident certainty that had marked the decision to launch Operation Void Clearance had evaporated. "The humans are adapting to us," he said without preamble. "Just like they adapted to the void. We attacked them so they learned to attack back, and they're better at it than we are because they think differently. They don't fight like planetary species." "Explain," In demanded. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "We rely on supply lines, on established positions, on territory to defend. The void humans don't. They can live anywhere. They don't need bases or supply depots. They can hide in empty space where our sensors can't find them, then strike from directions we don't expect. We're fighting an enemy that doesn't exist in the same physical space we do." "So what do you suggest?" the defense minister asked. His scales had lost their color, turning pale with stress. "We can't stop now. If we show weakness, they'll destroy us all." "They don't want to destroy us," said. "They want to be left alone. We started this war. We can end it. By surrendering, by accepting their presence. By accepting that the galaxy is big enough for both of us. They live in space we can't use. They're not taking our planets or our resources. If we stop attacking them, they'll stop attacking us." "You don't know that." "I do, because I've met them. I've talked with them. They're not monsters or conquerors. They're refugees who found a home in the void. We turned them into warriors by attacking them." The debate raged for hours. Some Council members wanted to escalate, to commit more forces, to hunt down every void habitat until the humans were extinct. Others argued for negotiation, for peace, for anything that would stop the bleeding. The fleets were hemorrhaging ships and personnel. The void humans seemed to know every move the Council made before they made it. It was a war the Council couldn't win, and everyone was beginning to realize it. While the politicians argued, received a message. It was from somehow delivered past all the military jamming and security protocols. The text was simple: "Meet me. Habitat 17. Come alone if you want to end this." He went without telling anyone. It was probably treason, but was past caring. He took a small personal ship and made the journey to the void reaches, half expecting to be intercepted by either Council military or human raiders. Neither happened. He reached Habitat 17 5 days later and was waiting for him. The habitat looked different now. The park-like interior had been replaced by what looked like a war room. Displays showed tactical information.